1994. That was the year in which Universal Studios sent out a message to the world. A message declaring, you thought the last 3 years were awesome Halloween parties? You ain't seen nothing yet. 'Cause we're gearing up for something incredible. This is going to be amped up to the nth degree. We're cranking it up. We are pulling out all the stops. This is going to be beyond what you've seen before. Yeah. And this message came to us in early October when we started getting some publicity when the media department started putting out the publicity about the event, and the stories they started publicizing were about something that was going on called Ghoul School. Ghoul School? Yeah, because the people who were going to be in the houses and in the streets, they were going to Ghoul School so they could learn to terrorize. Because it isn't just going to be, we had characters in the houses and we had characters in the streets for 3 years. Don't mistake, they existed. But now they're being defined. Now a new word was coined for what they did, and that word was scare actor. They aren't just people dressed as monsters anymore. They're actors who scare you. They are trained specially in Ghoul School to learn how to best make you scream like a little girl and wet your pants and poop yourself. That's what they're doing, so that when you go in 1994 to Halloween Horror Nights, you're gonna look something like this. Because you're gonna be got good by the scare actors. Yeah. It was exciting. It was wonderful. We knew they were learning the art of scarification down there at the Ghoul School. Ooh, it was so fun. In addition to this, something new was going on. Halloween Horror Nights, the advertisements that started to show the artwork, it wasn't the chainsaw cutting to the pumpkin that we'd seen for the past 2 years, no. Now we saw the oh-so-lovely familiar archway that led us into Universal Studios Orlando. That lovely archway, somehow perverted, possessed as if by the power of evil. A gigantic, enormous, grinning skull of demonic fury leering out at you, orange and burning with fire of inferno, and eyes, living eyes within the dead sockets, glaring down in malice and delight at the thought of devouring you, its skull jaw open and its glow emanating out as if the fire burning from the pits of hell itself were inside the skull, bursting forth. And there on either side of the archway of the skull were 2 leering gargoyles with glowing eyes. Not stone carvings, mind you, but actual beasts that had crawled out of the pit with their wings and horns and claws and fangs and those red eyes like they're going to leap down and attack you at any moment. This hellish apparition was the official icon? Well, let's be careful. Artwork, mascot, presenting image, logo for Halloween Horror Nights 4. The 4th annual Universal Studios Florida Halloween Horror Nights. And everything was bigger that year. Everything was taken a step further as they developed the art of the scare to new heights. In 1991, Fright Nights lasted for 3 nights. In 92 and 93, the first 2 Halloween Horror Nights, that is Halloween Horror Nights 2 and 3, but the first time they were called that, they lasted for 5 nights. Now, if you go look at HHN Rumors and dig up the vault archive they have, where they've managed to scavenge and preserve the old vault, part of the old vault, and you go look up Halloween Horror Nights 4, it'll say, dates of the event unknown. And if you go look in the HHN wiki, it won't list any dates there. And if you go looking around at just about anywhere online, you won't find those dates. Until now, when I will give them to you. So those of you who are interested in archiving this kind of information, get your pencils and papers ready. I will now tell you at last what days Halloween Horror Nights 4 were held. Okay? They were held on Friday, October 14th, Saturday, October 15th, Friday, October 21st, Saturday, October 22nd, Friday, October 28th, Saturday, October 29th, Sunday, October 30th, and Monday, October 31st, Halloween night. A total of 8 Halloween Horror Nights for the year 1994. Now you know. Now you can go archive that so the record will be out there. 3 weekends leading up to Halloween itself. And there it was. Now I myself, as in previous years, was only able to attend Halloween Horror Nights one night in 1994. And during that time in my life, up to I think 1999, when I was only able to go to the event on one evening, I understood that I really couldn't see everything myself. So I made damn sure I got to every single haunted house. And if I wanted to see a show, I made sure I saw Bill and Ted. So I managed in those years to see Bill and Ted every year and to do every haunted house every year. However, there were always some show or something I missed. I got the scare zones too, because that's not difficult to, just walk through the scare zone. But there were shows that I missed in those years. So, unfortunately, I will not be able to give you first-hand information about every single part of every single event. But I have done some research as best as I can to help you with those. Therefore, let us proceed after that disclaimer. In '94, as I said, they defined the word scareactor, even though, of course, there had been scareactors by any other name for 3 years. And in the same regard, there had been scareactors in the streets for the last 3 years as well. There were always, and as I mentioned, the Chainsaw Drill Team, although some people think it started in '94 based on some things they've seen on like the recent website, but if you go back and find a press release from '94, it'll say quite clearly, backed by popular demand, the Chainsaw Drill Team. They were there in '93 and called the Chainsaw Drill Team in '93, and they were also in existence in the park in '92 and in '91, when they were called Chainsaw Massacre. So they were made a part of the first scare zone. They're the kind of the stars of the first scare zone, but not the only ones. See, the idea is that although they always had them in the streets, the idea of making a scare zone was inaugurated in '94. This time, they would have one place where the scareactors would be concentrated, and the rest of the park fairly free of scares. Not entirely free, but fairly free of scares for people who were weak. And of course, the scare zone intense area. And this concept was born in 1994 with the first scare zone, which was called Horrorwood Boulevard, which, as logic would be in Hollywood Boulevard, of course. And thus the word Hollywood changed to Horrorwood for the first time in 1994, and that also is one of those legendary truthy type connections. Remember last year, Horrorwood die-in, Horrorwood. So the word Horrorwood began then. So remember those things if you need to, for the purposes of LT tracking fear through the years. Alright, now, in that lovely scare zone, we had the Chainsaw Drill Team, but they were also accompanied by 2 other interesting groups. So there were 3 groups, plus assorted other scareactors. But the first group was the Chainsaw Drill Team, of course, and then the second was a group called the Lizzie Borden Band and Axe Corps. Those aren't 2 groups. It wasn't the Lizzie Borden Band and the Axe Corps. No, it was the Lizzie Borden Band and Axe Corps, one group. And they were a group of women dressed in period costumes from the 19th century, like Lizzie Borden, led by Lizzie herself. Lizzie's face was ghastly white, as if she were living dead, and axe in hand, a corps of axe-wielding women, and then a small group of women with their musical instruments like a street band. Now, I don't know what music they played, because this was, again, we're talking 16 years ago, and to remember exactly what tune. But I would like to think, at least, and maybe someone has something, a piece of tape where they could play a video and we can hear what the music is. That'd be wonderful. Someone could post that up here. But my best I can hope for is that maybe they were playing that Offenbach Tararabumdies music that, in fact, was the music that the children used when they taunted Lizzie Borden in those days when she was, after she'd been acquitted of the crime, but they taunted her in the streets for the rest of her life every time they saw her in Falls River, Massachusetts. Go read your history books. And they taunted her with a song that would have sounded something like this. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. So perhaps that was the music they were playing. It would have been appropriate. In addition to these two groups, a third group, a unit of scareactors called Monks in the Hood. Now, there was nothing urban about the Monks in the Hood. There was nothing ghetto about them. In fact, they were whiter than white bread because they had pale, dead faces. But they were all wearing their hoods like a bunch of evil monks from the Middle Ages, probably spreading plague or death or something, or inquisition, ready to torture you because you were a heretic or something. And they were lurching about as well. So you had these three units. But in addition to that, there were a random assortment of scareactors of all types, also running amok in Horrorwood Boulevard, including all sorts of strange creatures, strange, bizarre creatures, including what really sticks in my mind was like a pig wearing a powdered wig. I don't know what the hell that was, but all sorts of weird things, evil clowns, what have you, all lurching about. That was the scare zone of Horrorwood Boulevard. Now, there were not one, not two, not three, but 4 houses this year. It was like every year a new house was added. But 4 houses, or maybe 5. I say this, 4 houses, but 5 mazes, perhaps, is a better way of phrasing it. And we'll get to that. We had, of course, the return of the Psychopath maze from the previous, which had debuted the previous year. So there's another one of your continuities. Once again, of course, that was placed right there on what they called in the brochure Psycho Hill, and over by the Bates Motel. And this time they had some interesting scenarios. They had scenes, I'm not sure if they're there in the previous year, but they had a scene through the graveyard. Now, there was no graveyard in Psycho, but ever since the Beetlejuice graveyard tour, they had a graveyard there by the Bates Motel. So they had a graveyard scene. They had scenes in the kitchen as well as in the shower, in the bathrooms, in the motel rooms, and of course a creepy old attic, which is odd because the climax of Psycho happens in a basement. But they had these sorts of scenes, and then still, of course, was your basic chased by transvestites with big knives. Norman! How dare you bring that slut in my house? Sorry, just had to do that. Okay, so that was the repeat house, but there was also return of another house that had not been seen for a year. Dungeon of Terror, of course, disappeared in '93 because its traditional home was gone, but it came back. It came back in a new home. It was the first house to be in the earthquake queue area. This was the first year they used the earthquake queue for a haunted house, and they built that up, and the first inaugural house was the return of the Dungeon of Terror. And this time the Dungeon of Terror, once again our lovely rat lady was back in the dungeon, but she was also joined by the Snake Master with his snakes. And there were a lot of different, it wasn't quite as intense as the original Dungeon of Terror, I have to say. You know, There's been a feeling that the houses in the earthquake queue lacked. That's not fair. There's some damn good houses in that area, but this one was a little bit less than the Dungeons of Terror from previous years, unfortunately. Running out of time. Come back in part 2.